Got a message about talking to you about something. Excuse me.
I heard. Great. Thanks for working on that. Yeah. I've got some numbers coming in, and then I had another idea. I have to talk to Daryl. So. Awesome. This tax thing.
I know, because I know it would be my fault.
Let's go. Yeah, I agree. Our quorum, we've got.
All right, I would like to welcome everyone out today. Thank you very much for coming out to our special Herrmann City Council meeting for Wednesday, August 4th, 2021. We will begin by starting with item 2.1, which is our Truth in Taxation public hearing to consider the rate of tax and levying taxes upon all real and personal property in Herrmann. I do have some public comment forms that I have received. We will be starting with a presentation from staff to outline what this exactly details, and then we will move from there. So I'll turn the time over to Alan Ray, who's our finance director.
Thank you. Okay, first of all, you'll notice on my presentation, it listed as a proposed tax reallocation because it isn't really a tax increase on our residents. So, you know, we'll go through real quickly and show what this does. And I think that it will clear up some of the things that you might want to have conversation about or comments about. Okay, first of all, currently this is how fire is paid for in the city of Herrmann. Our residents pay a property tax to Unified Fire Service Area. If you look on your property tax bill, there's a line item for Unified Fire Service Area. Okay? Unified Fire Service Area then contracts with Unified Fire Authority to provide our fire services. So right now, the property taxes for fire goes to Unified Fire Service Area. None of that money comes to the city of Herrmann. So all of that is done outside of us. Now, about a year ago, we got information from UFSA that showed that if you look at this spreadsheet, you'll see in the top section there, the revenue section, the screen isn't showing up, but total revenue. You can see that during 2016, UFSA collected $3,792,000 from our residents. This year, they expect to collect $6,141,000. Then if you look at the expenses that they're spending far less on our residents than they're collecting from our residents. In fact, over the last 5 years, UFSA has collected $3.5 million from our residents, more than what they're spending on our residents. That means all of that money is going to support the other cities in UFSA, okay? We have no access to that money. We can't get that $3.5 million, it's gone, okay? So we're putting this year, based on UFSA's numbers, our residents will be paying $6.1 million for UFSA. and they would be only getting services of 5.2. Okay, this has been an ongoing issue. So the city council decided last fall to withdraw from UFSA. Now, that is official. We're no longer in UFSA. So that line item will not show up on your tax bill this year. So,
Alan, will you please make sure you're speaking to the microphone for us?
okay.
Thank you.
So the proposal is that it change to do this. Instead of going to UFSA, that our residents pay the tax as part of their Herrmann city tax. And then we would continue to contract with Unified Fire. Now, we have left UFSA. That happened in January 1st. We have been paying for fire services so far this year, so far coming directly out of our general fund. Now, the proposal that's happening right now is that the tax rate that was on Unified Fire now be added to Herrmann City. Okay? So, when you get your tax bill, you pay taxes to all of these entities. You know, you pay Salt Lake County, School District, Herrmann City, the mosquito abatement, all of these entities. Okay? Currently, these are the rates that you pay each of those entities. You'll see that Herrmann City currently gets 0.000280. Okay? Unified Fire was getting 0.001717. And you'll see that the total mill rate being paid by our residents for all of the entities is 0.014199. Okay? Under this proposal, the cities would go to 0.001997. Unified Fire Service Area would go to 0. And the total our residents would pay would still be 0.014199. The rate does not go up in total. It's just a matter of what has been being paid to Unified Service Area will now come to the city, so that the city will be able to capture this extra money that was being sent to other cities under the UFSA model. And so, even though all of our residents got a letter from the county saying that our tax rate was going up, they are referring strictly to the Herrmann City line item of the bill. The county is not required to give a notice of anything that's going down. So they didn't notify anyone that Unified Fire Service Area went down. They only notified them that Herrmann City's was going up. So under this proposal, we're going to be approving, we're proposing a total mill levy for the city that would replace what's being taken away from Unified Fire Service Area. And it will result in our residents having the same total tax rate as they had prior to this change. That's what
Thank you.
Yep.
So Alan, I'm going to just ask you, sorry if maybe it's the wrong time to ask you this, but just because I was asked this in a meeting the other day, someone was confused. They're like, well, then why did my taxes still go up for Herrmann? Why, why are these taxes still going up? Because mine went up $300 a year. And the answer is because Herrmann still gets, it's calculated so that the mill levy drops as your property values. It's meant to keep us at the same rate. But what happens is if other properties throughout the whole entire state, if their property rates decline at ours and ours go up, we pay the difference in those.
Yeah.
So your taxes can still the value on there can go up based on the value of your home in comparison to the value across the whole entire state.
Right.
Okay.
Well, and
And that's not controlled by the city. That's state
Definitely
law.
state law.
yeah, you know, I believe that the state law is one of the better ones I've seen, just because you see a lot of states where the property tax bounces up and down based on the market of the houses, where ours is supposed to be adjusted so that as the value goes up, your rate goes down, and it does do that to some degree. But but it's not looking to make sure that your property taxes stay the same. It's actually looking to make sure that the budgets of the cities and the towns and the state stay the same. Okay?
So that we can't raise taxes without going through this process.
Right. And so it actually looks at our budget, and that it establishes that rate to make our budget stay the same regardless of what your tax rate is.
Thank you.
I'm going to throw our city attorney under the bus here real quick and ask him to explain why we were not able to put these funds into the Herrmann City Service Enforcement Area, as this body intended and tried to do earlier this year before we sent out this notification. Can you delve into that just a little bit for our residents' information?
Yeah, so it really comes down to timing. As with all of their matters tax-related, they're governed by state statute. These aren't deadlines that the city establishes, or even the county establishes. These are governed by the state legislature. So given the timing of our withdrawal from the Unified Fire Service area, and the creation of our own taxing entity to fund fire services, we needed to increase the city's rate in order to pay for those services. And then the plan is, this has been discussed in other public meetings, roll that tax over to that fire district, much like we do with our police to fund those services.
So the original intent of this body, we made the request to the county to be able to roll those funds into the Herrmann City Safety Enforcement Area, and we were denied that request because we were unable to, it would have gone over the rate that particular entity is allowed to tax. And so we have created a fire service district that will go into effect next year, but due to that timing, we were not able to put those funds into that district this year. We were required to roll that into the city tax as opposed to putting it into that separate district, so those funds were clearly delineated and separated for the use of fire services exclusively. Is that correct?
And so we'll see that this same hearing will happen next year, because next year we'll have to come back and say, it'll look like we have a huge tax increase on a line that's going to be our fire line. And then, but there'll be that corresponding decrease on the Herrmann City one, but it
Right.
won't be reflected in the bottom one.
Yes, next year there will be this same amount or something similar to this for fire district, and that will be coming out of the city's tax rate at that point. And that actually is recorded with the county that is our intention, so.
So we've already created that, or we've already started the process of creating that fire district. And just to be clear for everyone who's listening, the fire district is simply a taxing entity. It's who we pay our taxes to make sure that the services get provided. It does not have anything to do with Unified Fire itself. At this point, unless I'm mistaken, and these members of this body can correct me if I'm wrong, there's no intent at this point or even discussion to leave Unified Fire as a service provider. This is simply to make sure that those taxes are being spent in our community, since we're the ones paying for them. Unified Fire does a very good job and charges the residents based on the number of calls that they receive from our community. And so this will ensure that we're paying directly for the services that we are receiving. So that's the intent, at least in my opinion. That's the intent of this change, is to simply ensure that our taxes are staying here. And the intent of this body, which has been made abundantly clear by this body, is that next year, when we do have the ability to, we will roll those tax funds into a separate service, our taxing entity that will require that those be spent on that fire service so that it can't be used for other things such as infrastructure or, parks or anything like that. We intend to keep these funds very specifically designated for that fire service. Unfortunately, we are in the situation where we are now where the timing didn't allow us to make that happen this year, or we would have done that.
I think the other thing, just to point out, that $3.5 million we've lost in the last 5 years would go a long ways to building the 2 new fire stations we need. And by doing this, we give ourselves the opportunity to gather those funds and be able to begin to work towards getting those stations that we need in the future, so.
One last thing that I'd like to, and maybe Jared might be the right person to talk to about this one, was one of the things that prompted us to make this decision was in regards to the fire service area considering an additional bond that our residents would be responsible for. Can we speak to that for a minute?
Sure. I'm our representative on the UFA board and was on the UFSA board until we left in January. Just a couple minor clarifications. The fee that we pay to Unified Fire Authority for their services isn't solely based on calls. It's a contract fee based on the number of, so with our 2 current stations, the number of employees that service those, the equipment, et cetera, we pay that service cost, and then there's a portion of that fee is based on calls for service. So there's kind of that inherent cost with the structure that's there, the people manning it, et cetera, and then the calls play a factor in that. Every single year that's evaluated across the board for Unified Fire Authority, and they let us know if our cost next year goes up a little bit or down a little bit based on those calls. So as we look to build new stations, there will of course be an increase in our cost to man those stations, et cetera. The things that kind of prompted this really drove us to do it on this kind of accelerated timeline, if you will, was that UFSA, Unified Fire Service Area, the taxing district, wanted to go out to do another bond, which means a tax increase for those members to raise funds to rebuild some stations and build new stations in other communities. The position that we're in, as Alan outlined, is we've kind of been paying a surplus for several years. When the city was first formed, we were one of those that was benefiting from the extra money others were paying in, right? Well, I think we've gone back and calculated, we've more than paid back what we've used and then some. We're looking at that bond coming up going, we've got 2 more stations that need to be built and they could be funded from that bond, but we're still paying basically bond obligations for other areas, for other buildings. We're just paying more and more money out. At what point do we stop and say, no, we need to control our own money? So the board was, to give you an idea of the dynamics of that board, there's a 13-member board. I'm our only representative on that board. So we really have no control over our money that goes, our residents' money. It goes into that pool, and that 13-member board decides where it goes. So Riverton and Herrmann, our two representatives, voted against doing that. They wanted to proceed anyway, and they had good reasons that they wanted to proceed with that, but it just necessitated us to take a harder look at this and speed up our timeline to separate from the service area, simply to control the money, so that we pay that contract fee and keep that extra money, say, estimated nearly $1 million next year, and that's just a service fee. I don't believe that includes impact fees, right, Alan?
Yes.
That we can then use that money towards paying off our debt obligations on the building that's already been paid. We've negotiated that with UFSA, and then can look towards putting funds towards building new stations as the city continues to grow, and then continue to fund those new stations with that. Does that sum it up well enough?
For that clarification, I appreciate that.
Just a comment, Mr. Mayor, if I may. Obviously, this has been another good explanation by Alan tonight, our finance director. And these are always challenging situations, obviously. When anybody hears tax increase, then obviously, the hair stands up on the back of your neck and you want to know what that's for. We've known, obviously, the position we've been in for a couple of months once we got word from the county that we were not able to add to that tax rate into our existing service area. So I just want to say that I think our staff has done an amazing job in trying to put information out there to help explain this. We're not always able to reach everybody, obviously, in the mediums that we use for communications. I know we've used the water bill to help circulate some information. if you're on social media, there's been posts about that and about the meetings. And in particular, along with this explanation tonight, if you haven't had a chance to go on the city's website, there is a page on the city's website that is 100% dedicated to explaining this again. And there's some good graphics on there to help you, to help illustrate and understand that. My encouragement to those that where this information may be new to you is if you haven't had a chance to go and look at the city's website as well after, to really help give you that concrete understanding of exactly what this change means in terms of the tax rate that's moved from the UFSA to the cities, and what the plan is next year, obviously, to move it into another taxing entity, because as mentioned, we're going to have to go through a truth in taxation again next year, as we now take this percentage of the taxes collected from you, the residents, out of the city's fund and put it in the district's fund, entirely committed to paying for fire services. So the more we can do, obviously, and here's that on our city's website. Thank you for pulling that up. Again, a tremendous amount of information on here if you haven't had a chance to see that, to help really explain the in-depth of this. Again, we try very hard to over-communicate this important information to our residents, but sometimes it's just not possible to really get that word in and ensure that that word gets out to everybody. But our staff has done an amazing job in trying to do that. So.
Please, while you've got your property bills out, please study those, look at them. Most people assume, I've been saying this for the 5 years, almost 6 years, been sitting up here. Please look at that, because most people assume that their property taxes go to the city. Nope, they go to the county, school district, police and fire. And until this last couple of years, police and fire weren't controlled by the city.
If you'll leave that, sorry, Jared, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just want you to roll that graphic up just a little bit, right there, the dollar bill as it's all shaded out there. And it will.
Yes, thank you. And it'll
Yes.
kind of show that for you. I mean, there's a very small amount that goes to Herrmann City. It accounts for roughly, 6% of our operating budget? I mean, about the 17 million, take out police, and about 17 is maybe 5 or 6% of our operating budget. So it's very minuscule, where we use funds from sales tax and other things to fund for operations. So please take a second look at it and educate your neighbors as well.
Yeah, less than 3% of what they pay in their taxes come to the city. The rest of it go to the other entities, so.
Just want to ask, I know that Councilman Shields was trying to hop online. Has he been able to join us, Steve? We can, just barely. You're fairly garbled, but you are there if you'd like to make any comments on this before we take public hearing.
No.
Not really. That's much better, Steve. Thank you. All right. Any further comments, questions, information from staff before we open the public hearing? Okay. So we will, in just a moment, open the public hearing on this item. I have received comment forms from several individuals, so we will start with those individuals. If you would like to speak, please come to the podium and state your name for us, just so that we can have that for the record. We will start with Mike Jensen. Mike, if you'd like to come up and speak, please.
Okay, yeah, so my name's Mike Jensen, and I've lived in Herrmann for about 14 years. 14393 Butterfield Parkway, up in that area. Do you need any other information other than
No,
that?
that's just fine. And I'm sorry, I'm going to cut you off. I'm going to reset your time. There is a 2-minute time limit.
Okay.
We're going to try to be as understanding on that time limit as possible, but we have several individuals who like to speak, so if that time cuts out, please understand that's just trying us to be respectful of everyone's time. So,
That's no problem. So basically, my question is, so I got some more information. So what you're saying is that the increase that I'm going to see this year, I'm going to get that back here plus more? Because right now I'm seeing an increase, right?
No.
So explain that to me a little better.
yeah, so the county is not required to show on your property tax that anything is being reduced. All that they're required to do is show that there is an increase. So what they did not show you this year is that there was a reduction in your value, in the property taxes that you paid to the Unified Fire Service area. So that amount that you paid last year to the Unified Fire Service area is what is being transferred into Herrmann City this year. So the actual amount, the rate that you're paying, is the exact same whether we were paying them or whether we were paying into the city, so that we can control those own
So what you're
funds.
saying is the almost $600 that I'm going to pay, that it showed on my property tax form?
You
would
would
have
have
showed, it would have showed in, under the unified?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
You'll see like right here.
Okay.
It'll say Unified Fire Service. See, mine says 0, but last year it was $748, but this year it's 0. But then that money is up here on the Herrmann City one now. So this column is now a 0, where it used to be 700, and up here it shows on the Herrmann instead.
So if I look at my if I look at my property tax form now, I won't see any difference between that last year and this year.
Any difference that you see has to do with property value changes, not because tax rate changes.
Okay. All right, so if that's, so understanding that's fine. If there is a tax increase, however, just let me make my voice known.
Please.
We're just coming out of COVID. I don't know if you noticed, but my fuel tax has doubled. I go to the store, it's increased. The valuation of my home is only good if I sell it, okay?
You're here?
So the point that I'm trying to make is that I haven't received any extra income, and I'm over time almost, but I haven't received any extra income. So please, don't pull what's not there, because it's not there. I'm already, my income, what I'm using to pay bills and everything else, it's just not there. So I'll look at my property tax a little more closer, but yeah, I was a little bit concerned.
Understandably so.
Yeah, I just thought maybe, man, I can't free myself from the federal governments. I can't free myself from the state government. And now my own city's going after it, as well as the county. And in the store and everywhere else I go, they're all trying to get money out of me, and I don't have it. So, okay.
Thank you. We appreciate that, Mike. All right, we will move on to the next comment form that we have. I'm going to say this wrong, I'm sure. Melissa Pfluger, please come to the podium. Did I get that right?
Close.
Okay.
My name's Melissa Flieger, and I live at 6648 West Monty Joseph Drive in Herrmann. We've been residents for 18, almost 19 years. And unfortunately, it's our opinion that the Herrmann City government in the past has not really protected us from the incredible growth and infrastructure, and appropriate amounts have not been passed on to the developers who are better suited, especially in the year of COVID with 5% CPI index, people's 401ks and retirement gone. And so I appreciate the explanation that's been provided, but it does leave me with a few questions, and I'll just ask the questions and then perhaps the council can answer them as they see fit. But the increase, as I understand it, will not only be for 1 year. The increase will show in a different line, and it will be for the fire authority. Based on the expectation of the savings that we have seen in the Mr. Reed's presentation, It appears that there will be a slush amount that will not actually be used for calls, but that Herrmann will keep on hand to later make sure that it can only go to fire. And at this time, it seems like that's very unfair to pass that cost on to the city residents by asking for us to pay more than actually is needed. It is my opinion that we should only be asked to pay what is in the budget for fire for this tax year, and that when you go to truth in taxation next year, you would tax residents appropriately at that time. It concerns me that there would be possibly administrative fees to the city and other things, and while I agree that we would want to spend Herrmann tax dollars in Herrmann, it feels wrong to me to tax them under the guise that it will be for future fire costs and not for actual fire costs. And so I'm asking that you tax us only for the actual costs. I don't know if the proposed budget is on the website. If it is, then we should be able to compare what that is by the number of houses, by how much the property tax is, and determine how much we are being overtaxed. So again, I would ask for consideration about that. I will just say that there is an increase in accidents every day to and from work. People are dying on our roads due to the lack of infrastructure. Not asking for you to fix that at this time, but with the increased commute times, increased fuel times are factoring in, and people are still looking for work. And so please, only tax us what is necessary at this time. Don't have a slush fund to tax for the future. Please tax us accurately and provide that information before you vote on whether or not you'll adopt the budget and whether to approve this tax. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And I'm sure there will probably be more questions, and we will do our best to address as many of them as we reasonably can after we've given everybody an opportunity to ask their questions. We'll move on to Ronald Kohler.
Hi, my name's, excuse me if I can get my voice, Ron Kohler. I live at 5414 West Copper Gulch Lane, 30B. The only thing I wanted to say tonight is, and I've spoken to a few others here, I used to be the city treasurer for Murray City for 37 years. And one thing that Herrmann hasn't really done is bring business into the city because they were a farming community. Riverton and South Jordan has drained the money away from Herrmann. Cities know that they don't live on property tax. They live on sales tax. When I was at Murray, we had Fashion Place Mall. We had all the car dealerships. We paid for our computer system. We paid for all the extras, the golf course, out of that extra money. And Herrmann could do the same thing. If you draw people from outside Herrmann to come into businesses in Herrmann, they help pay our costs. And if you draw the right businesses, they'll do that. They'll come in and spend their money with sales tax. Then your percentage comes back to the city that helps the citizens pay for their costs. So I just want to encourage you to please start looking at some, you are with the auto mall and with Winco in that area, but you really don't have a lot of sales tax draw in Herrmann. And that's just a plus. So that's all I want you to do. Don't put it on the backs of the citizens because property tax doesn't make you that much money compared to sales tax. So I just want to encourage you to start looking that way. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, we move on to Larry Sumson.
I just had a couple of questions. Where it says on the Herrmann city tax, it was, on my home was $45.92, but if the increase goes up, it's gonna go up to $315.65. How is that 87%? Isn't 100% of $45.92, $45.92, which would make the bill 94 or just over $90, $92 or something?
And not being able to see your particular tax rate, I can't
Well,
necessarily speak to how the county does that.
Well, you want the tax rate?
So I wouldn't be qualified for that. I don't want to speak for the county when they may, because the county is the one that sends that out. So I don't want to.
Oh, but it says
misinterpret.
Herrmann City tax on it.
And the number we go off of would be the mill rate. The actual rate itself is the
Okay.
number that we
Well, I
use.
just want somebody to explain to me
So
how you
we will,
get
yeah, we'll see.
$315 out of a
So
$45 bill and call it 87%.
So when we're done with public comment and done, we'll see if our staff, who's a little bit more qualified, might be able to assist you with.
Right.
We just don't want to, I don't want to give you information that I don't know for sure is 100%
All right,
right.
I got one more question. Seems how we've lost, or not lost, but you do the fire and police under Herrmann. Now it says the county. What are we getting for the $321 they're taking out for Salt Lake County? Do they do our roads out here? Do you guys do them, or?
That's a good.
You would
That
have
is
to,
an
that is a
excellent
question we
question.
ask to the county every day.
You would have to ask the county. We can't answer for them.
Answer for that either?
So that's a valid question and that's fair, but that is a tax amount that is designated by the county, is controlled by the county, and we don't get those funds. Now, we will go out and do everything we can to get any tax benefits that we can from the county, but that is a budget entirely controlled by the county that we have no real say in.
So
And so-
basically just a privilege of living in Salt Lake County.
So, and
Yes.
that would be up to them to determine.
One more quick, one. With all the home building going on out here, is that gonna lower our taxes or make it go up? Because you're gonna say we have more services to service them. Or is that gonna lower our tax because of all these other homes being built out here?
That's not a question that I could answer right now for you today. All right, so that brings us to the list of comment forms that I've received. If there's anybody else that would like to come up and make comment at this time, please come up to the podium and state your name and give us your comment. All right, seeing none, I will accept a motion to close the public hearing at this time.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So unfortunately, at this point, we've actually closed the public hearing, so we do have to move on with the meeting, but we will do our best to answer your question afterwards. Please understand that we just have to follow this process as designated by the state, so
Yeah,
thank you.
please catch one of us afterwards.
Please don't think that we're trying to dismiss you. Okay. All right, discussion by this council. Would we like to have staff try to see if they can answer some of these questions first, or would we like to try to answer them?
Well, I would say maybe, I don't know if Alan wants to try and answer the percentage of increase question.
Yeah, let's start with that one.
The slush fund? Yeah.
No.
No.
No. The last one.
Yeah, with the
Oh,
dollar
okay.
differences.
You know, that's a hard one to answer. Like the mayor said, we'd have to look at what the mill rates are, but, you know, county sent out these notices with a percentage that applies to everyone on an average. And they put the same percentage on every one of those notices. Now, the actual change in the amount is going to be different on every one of them. So that's hard to understand, you know, his percentage seems kind of out of whack, but, you know.
Agreed.
But the county provided those notices, they do all of that. Now, you know, Herrmann City has had the same tax rate since they became a city. They haven't changed it.
20 years.
20 years. You know, just so people understand, Herrmann City this last year got roughly $800,000 total in property taxes. Now, there is a lot of effort going into sales tax, and as was mentioned, businesses bring a lot in, and last year our sales tax was in the range of $11 million. So, you know, $11 million in sales tax, $800,000 in property tax. We don't live off of property taxes. And, you know, so,
And we've I think, quadrupled our sales tax in the last 4 years.
well, we went up 35% just this year. So, you know, it's gone up a lot. I did want to address the slush fund comment, though. If I intended to mean that we don't have a need right now, that's not what I meant. You know, we do have one fire station right now that's essentially been condemned. That money, that excess money initially is going to go towards that fire station and replacing that fire station.
As well as a good portion goes towards our ongoing obligations with UFSA. Part of our separation agreement was to continue paying off our share of that bond over the next 10 years.
But as we look at fire, we look at several things. One is, what does it take us to make calls now? But we're also looking at, you know, if we don't collect all of this tax this year, we gotta take longer down the road before we're ready to build any of these stations. You know, if you have to build up over time, you miss a year, you're just that much further down the road. As been mentioned, everything's going up in cost, and we're seeing it in construction. Construction costs are going up every day. So the longer we take before we can build that station, you know, the harder it'll be to pay for it. And we know that beyond this one station that's already been condemned and needs to be replaced, we need at least one more. Now, when I talk about that being done in the future, I'm talking about because they have to be designed, they have to be located. You know, there's a lot of work to do in the meantime, but to accumulate the cost for it reduces the amount, the need for debt as we get into that situation, so.
I'll just add, to put that in perspective, because I've been part of all those conversations with the county and UFSA. I mean, to put it in perspective, just 2 new buildings, just basic buildings for fire service, we're talking $10 to $12 million total, right? $5 to $6 million per building just for construction costs in today's dollars. And then our contract fee for Unified Fire Authority would go up by $2 million for each station per year, right? To pay for the engines, the employees, et cetera. So there is no slush fund. There will be no slush fund. We're simply going to make sure that the money stays here and that we increase our level of service as we continue to grow.
Yeah. A quick comment there to piggyback on what Councilman Henderson has said. And I appreciate the question that was asked very much, because it's all about education and understanding, right? And that's what we really want to aim for, is that we give you the information to help you understand. And that really is that we have a deficit already today in terms of buildings for our adequate fire response. And that's the next issue that, as a council, that we have to tackle is how do we plan and move forward for the building of the one station that is currently, as Alan just mentioned, in beyond poor condition, and then plan for the next station beyond that, which we know is already really a need exists for that. And Steve made a comment, you know, at the start of this meeting, that our goal is to be able to meet those ongoing needs, those upcoming needs for fire protection services within the tax rate that currently exists. We do not want to, as a council, have to come back in a year or 2 years from now, once we get the fire district established, and that being the taxing entity, to do that and increase those taxes to use the residents in order to continue to support the fire services that are being provided here. We want to be able to plan and continue to do that within the existing rate that exists today, which you see on the board is that 0.001717. It does provide a little beyond what our services are costing us to operate today, but it does not meet the ongoing needs for the buildings themselves that we have, and that's where we are now trying to come up with an adequate plan in order to be able to provide those without changing that tax rate to you as the residents. Just to give you an idea, Councilman Henderson again alluded to this in total cost, or excuse me, of estimated cost of fire stations. Being in that service myself, I have a chief of another department who is working on a current plan, and everyone, I think, kind of goes back to when they built their homes and what their cost per square foot was when they built their homes. And it used to be that anything over $100 was expensive for a home and cost per square foot, not in today's dollars. Cost per square foot right now for fire stations is running between $430 and $450 per square foot in today's dollars to build those. And so that tells you what type of a market we're dealing with and how we need to plan effectively in order to meet that need for services in our own city, but to be able to do that within that existing tax rate as it sits today. The last thing I'll say is the comments on economic growth. Couldn't agree more. Continuing to work on that. And the other thing I'll just say is a very good question on what do we get from Salt Lake County for the tax amount. That's something that we as a council struggle with all the time, continuing to work with the county to really get clarity on what that is, and we will continue to do so.
I would just make one comment to the gentleman who asked about the growth. The growth is intended to pay for itself, so each new home that comes in has to pay into the same fire service district and things like that. So the idea is that as the growth comes, the fees associated with that growth pays for the growth so that that doesn't negatively impact the residents who are here. They should pay for the growth as they come.
And we've made substantial changes to that in the last little while. So we have instituted the public service impact fee here in the community. What that means is that when a new home is built, not the current residents, but the new home is built, they pay an additional fee to help pay for the infrastructure needs for that particular service. So in regards to public safety, that would be funds that are specifically by state law designed only to be used for police and fire to help build out the infrastructure that we need so that the new homeowners are paying for that and that the homeowners that are already here are not paying for that growth. That's the way that that's intended to work, and we have instituted that, which we did not have even just a couple of years ago. With that also, I do want to touch on Fire Station 103. There is a presentation that this body received a couple weeks ago, a month or two now, in regards to that particular fire station. The conditions in that fire station are absurd. It is one of the reasons why I personally made this choice to leave the service district and to take the finance on our own. We are to the point, that fire station, that we're not sure we can repair the plumbing for fear that it will break to the point that we have to spend $100,000 to replace the entire plumbing in the entire building. The conditions which our firefighters are living in is frankly absurd, and I am disappointed and disgusted by them. As part of that, part of this process is to make sure that we are addressing some of those issues. So I think it is an absolute fair argument to say that we need to make sure that we don't have a slush fund. I think that that is a fair concern. But the amount that it's going to take for us to get that to a condition where our firefighters can respond in a way that protects our public safety, where they can get the sleep that they need when they're not working, where they can be taken care of in an appropriate manner, is going to take some adjusting on our part because it wasn't done by the fire service district that we were in. So in my opinion, one of the reasons this change needs to happen is so that we can make sure that we are putting public safety first and that we're not putting another community's public safety first. We are happy to be partners when it comes to public safety, and if another community needs our help, we will always respond. That is never going to be in question. However, when it comes to our residents' tax dollars, we want to make sure that we are spending those on our community and that our community is safe first and that we are taking care of the residents that live here first. For me, that's the reason why this change is being made. It is not to increase the tax rate that anybody is paying, and frankly, we're not doing that. And what it is to ensure that we can provide the public safety that our residents expect and that, frankly, that we are required to provide as we move forward. So in my opinion, that's what this is all intended to do, and we will continue to do that as we move forward. But I'm just one of 5 people on this body.
Mary, I just have one more question, if I may. The gentleman who asked about increases, going to the grocery store, going to the gas pump, and those types of things. I think that that's what's great about the structure of our government, because we're local here. I live here just the same as you all live here. We live in this community. I go to that grocery store and I feel that same pain. I go to that gas tank and that gas station and feel that same pain. And so that's the beauty of being able to come here and interact with one another. So thank you for coming. Thank you for showing up with your concerns. Sometimes the answer isn't always what we want to hear, and I understand that too, but the best thing that we can do is to have a dialogue and to talk these things out and trying to come to an understanding so that we make good decisions. So I just wanted to thank you for being here and thank you for sharing your concerns with us.
I got several things. I don't want to make Alan stand up there any longer needs to. I know this we can call him back up. But same sentiment. Thank you all for coming and being engaged and asking questions rather than just sending us angry emails and phone calls and Facebook things that we have no idea what we're doing. So thank you very much for being here to ask your questions and get some answers, even if they're not the ones that you want. Tax increases in general. I want to make kind of this point on tax increases in general. I mentioned that I was our representative on the UFA board, UFSA board. We all sit on those kind of boards representing the city for various taxing entities. And on every single one of those, since I got involved in this, I don't know how many years ago, but on the council now for 5.5 years, in every single one of those boards that I've been on, mainly police and fire at this point, from my experience, but going to the other meetings, they all get to a point where they say it's time for a tax increase. And when they do the numbers, and I hear it most from, say, the school district and the county, when I look at my own property tax bill, it's only gonna be, $20 or $30 for the average $300,000 home. Well, that average $300,000 home is now $600,000 home, and if you do that by every single taxing entity, that's a gigantic difference. My tax bill is more than doubled since the time I moved here 12 years ago. I haven't done that much improvement with my house. The value hasn't. I mean, that's the way the taxes work. Just because my home value has gone up doesn't mean my taxes go up with it, right? It's each entity has to come in and say we want more total money. Therefore, we want more total money, and then the tax rate increases to X, right? They're not saying we want a higher rate. They're saying we want more total money. Correct, Alan? Yes. Right. So let's say if we have nobody new moves in, and we're in just the Herrmann bubble. We're not affected by any other housing prices in the state, et cetera. And housing prices in Herrmann go up. In that scenario, you would not see an increase due to the value of your home, right? So I hope this makes sense when I explain it this way. When I looked at my own property tax bill, and I added up the difference between what the Unified Fire Service area line said for last year, right? And then added it to what the Herrmann line said, there was a $7 and some odd cent difference between that number and what the actual number for Herrmann City is printed this year. That $7 difference is the effect of other communities' home values in relation to Herrmann's. I don't know if that makes adequate sense, but that's about the best way I can explain it at this point. I hope that makes some sense, but I want to go back to the point that every single one of these boards that we sit on, they all ask for tax increases. And I've sat through, I don't know how many meetings, and I've said, yeah, but when you add that up, when you make that real for a real average home, it's well more than the average you're quoting to people. And when you add that up by 10 different agencies, it's a significant increase every single time. And so I know all of us are fighting on those boards to do that, but we're used to maybe 2 or 3 people showing up to a council meeting, sometimes none. Those 2 or 3 usually during election season, right? Go to those board meetings. Take any one of these that you see on the monitor, go to one of those board meetings, and you'll not have a single resident there, hardly ever. And they're the ones who are setting your tax rates, right? So when I make the plea every time we talk about taxes, please pay attention to property taxes. Please pay attention to each one of those organizations. As I said, on the fire service area, I represent Herrmann, but I'm 1 out of 13, right? There's very little power control there. Yep, we have representation, but we don't have representation, right? So talk to your representatives, reach out to all those different areas. The notion, a couple people have mentioned that there's an increase this year and a decrease next year. That's not what's happening. It's the same amount this year. We're just taking what was on the fire service line and moving it to the Herrmann line this year. Next year, that same amount will go back down to a line that says the Herrmann Fire Service Area. So that it's not an increase and a decrease. It's the same amount, it's the same rate. This year and next year, just two different lines.
Jared, can I just, to maybe help clarify, that .001717 that is being combined into the Herrmann City rate this year, next year, you will see the Herrmann Fire Service Area with that .001717 amount next to it.
And the Herrmann will go back down to the .000280, right? I appreciate the notion with the slush fund and maybe another clarification for the difference in the monies that way. What Alan pointed out with that slide, I don't know if somebody's got that, can maybe go to that one year over year, 2016 to 2020, showing the difference and roughly the 3.5 million over that period of time. That's not extra money that is just sitting somewhere. That's the hopefully $1 million or so extra that we'll collect next year that we didn't collect this year. That's not just going to be sitting there doing nothing, right? That money's put to use. As part of UFSA, it goes to UFSA, and it's put to work in the other communities, right? So if we stay in UFSA, they continue to take that money directly from property tax and use it wherever they want across the service area. By separating that and having it be the Herrmann Fire Service Area, we keep that money in Herrmann, and we can decide, instead of going to that board of 13 people and begging to get our own money back to fix this station, we keep that money here, and these 5 people can decide to use that money to fix that station. To me, that's the fundamental difference there. It's not extra money. That money will be put to use right away to pay off. Like I said, we have an obligation with the current bond over the service area that's frankly benefiting all of the other communities more than it is us. We had to agree to continue to pay our portion of that for 10 more years on top of our contract fee to provide basic fire service, on top of our obligation to rebuild Station 103 and build a second station to the west because our service is under what it should be for fire response, especially in our area. So that money will go to work right away and has been working. There's no extra. To put it in perspective, and we are not making our own fire department, but police. I was chatting with somebody before the meeting started. When we separated the the police department, we did create our own police department. We're not creating our own fire department, but we took control of the money the same way, right, with the taxing district. And with the we did not increase the tax rate, nor do we have any plans to. With that same tax rate, that first year we went from 18 officers to 36. Right? Because we kept the money here and we got to decide how to use it rather than it go to the service area and they spread it out however they want across the other communities. I hope that sort of thing kind of sinks in. With every new additional home, right? Because it's property tax, the new growth, that money stays here, as was mentioned, whether it's impact fee or the property tax with new homes, and that new money will go towards providing new services. Since that time with the police department, we've continued to hire new officers every year. The tax rate has not gone up. We've used that new money to hire new officers and have increased service for those new areas. The same thing will happen with fire. At least that's the intention of this body. Let's see, I want to make sure I address all of them. The comment about businesses, and I know that Mr. Kohler had stepped out. I'll send him an email. He's in my district. We've talked about this a few times. His comparison with Murray is interesting, but it's like comparing apples and bowling balls is my the comparison I always use with these. Murray, if you think about sales tax and location of commercial entities, we don't get to say, hey, we want a Costco right here. They have to want to be here. It's their business. They choose where they want to be. We can offer incentives and do all the things that we have been doing to entice them to come here, but they have to choose to be there. In fact, I'll tell you, we outbid Riverton, and they still chose to go on that side of the line. That's not our choice. We can say we want a Trader Joe's. Somebody called me and said, how do we get a Trader Joe's? I said, talk to Trader Joe's and tell them you want one here. There's plenty of property that the city doesn't own the property, right? The property owners. We can do the zoning and say it's commercial, we can support it with tax incentives that we are in control of, but we can't make them come here. So as we've done our research and in my own business, et cetera, why do those businesses choose where they want to be? Generally, it's along major transportation corridors, right? Access. Some of them want to be next to other businesses that feed off of each other. Restaurants. Why don't we have sit-down restaurants? Because we don't have employment centers. They need daytime lunch traffic in order to survive, not just nighttime. So there's all of those factors, and absolutely we're working on all of those things. It would be nice if we had State Street and I-15 and 215 surrounding our city like Murray. That would be awesome. Riverton and South Jordan have advantages over us due to their location as well, right? The way I've described it is that Herrmann City is kind of a cul-de-sac in Salt Lake County. We're not on the way anywhere, right? The only reason you come here is if you live here. He did make the point that we need to try to bring people here to spend money, absolutely, and that's part of our strategic plan. We've hired a new city manager. We've talked about extensively over the last few years about the mountain and working with the Camp Williams, getting federal money to open up recreation areas, work with the county and other entities to get recreation going in the mountains and canyons. Look at our open spaces. Can we have bigger parks with multiple ball fields to have people come here to play, spend their money, right, buying lunch and dinner, whatever, and then go home to receive their services. Absolutely, we're working on all of those things, but we just don't have those transportation corridors. We're working on trying to get that as well. We've tried to preserve areas around what transportation corridors we do. We do have with things that he mentioned, so absolutely, we want those things for all the reasons mentioned. When it comes to sales tax, I think the important thing to keep in mind is that it's 50-50, and every area has, or every state has a different structure. I'm sorry, I could go on like this forever, but I have a captive audience right now, and you want to hear about taxes, we'll talk about taxes. I'm the finance guy. And Alan, stop me anytime or interject if I misspeak here. But the state of Utah has and every state is different, right? If you go to neighboring states, I do financial planning for a living, right? Arizona doesn't have state income tax. You can save 5% on your taxes just by moving to Arizona right now, right? But they don't have other things as well. Every state chooses their tax structure. Utah chooses to do it this way. Florida, I love Florida, but most of their freeways and roads are toll roads. We don't have toll roads in Utah. We have taxes, right? So it's every state chooses. In Utah, we have a 1% local sales tax, right? Half of that 1% goes to population. So we get a distribution every month from the state based on our population, that sales, of that 1% across the state. The other half goes to the municipality where that business is located, right? So it does make a difference if you shop in Smith's on 118th, which is on the other side of the road in South Jordan, or you shop at the Smith's that's in Herrmann, right? If you go to the one in South Jordan, they get half of that 1% because it's on that side of the road. That
Right.
all right? Keep looking, make sure I'm on point. So those things absolutely make a difference. The $11 million in sales tax, how much of that is from the population and how much is from our?
Nearly 80% coming from population base.
Right, and so our population has gone up, we get that increase, but our businesses have done better as well. Yep, right now we've got a couple of grocery stores and some fast food places and convenience stores, etc. We need as many of them as we can get. We need some employment centers, right, to bring people into the city during the day to work, have traffic go the other way, what a novel idea. Have them actually spend money here and then go home. All of those sorts of things play into it. So I think I beat that horse to death a little bit. I'd be happy to talk to anybody afterwards if you have more questions or suggestions or anything. And then Mr. Jensen's comments about the growth and will it result in higher taxes or lower taxes. That's why you need to stay involved and talk to the people who are up here. And I point that way because it's us right now. It'll be a couple different people in January, and every 2 years there's that election, and you need to stay involved to make sure that the people representing you are representing you, right? The way the growth is supposed to work, as Sherry mentioned, is that when a new home is built, they'll pay an impact fee for roads, water, sewer, et cetera. And that impact fee is supposed to pay for that home's share of the new road, new sewer, new whatever being built. It does not pay for new service, right? That's where the population sales tax comes in and all those other sorts of things. Will taxes be higher or lower? It totally depends on how that growth is managed, how we incorporate all those other things I just talked about, and what decisions people up here over the coming years make. When I ran the first time 5.5 years ago, 6 years ago, I made the comment then that the decisions that this body makes over the next 5 to 10 years will determine the fate of this city, right? And I still believe that we're roughly halfway through that period. The decisions that have been made in that first 5 years and this next 5 years are gigantic. So please, please, please stay involved and let all the people up here know what you think.
I just have one more comment on your taxes, just because this always is somewhat, it keeps things in perspective for me. If I look at my last year's Herrmann city tax, I paid $103.23 to the city I live in, and that city has to provide services and things like that for me, right? I paid $189.87 to the Salt Lake County Library. So I paid $86 more to the library system than I did to my own city last year, and that's how it'll continue again this year. The numbers have changed, obviously, but that just kind of puts in perspective for people what a small amount of our property taxes our local municipalities really actually get. I don't have any problem with libraries. I'm just saying that it's interesting, the difference.
I want to make sure that we don't forget our other council member, Councilman Smith, our Shields, sorry, Shields. Do you have any comments you'd like to make?
It'd be easier if the process were more clear and the notices were more clear. And that's what will happen next year, is there will be a notice saying that there's this new fire thing and it's going up by this much, but it won't tell you that the city is going down by an equal amount. So we'll have the same discussion next year. Hopefully, everybody will kind of want to come then.
All right, so I think council has had the discussion they need to have. As such, I will accept a motion in regards to item 3.1, discussion consideration of ordinance adopting a final budget.
So moved.
Second.
I just want to make sure that we get this correctly. Would you mind giving the whole motion, please?
Oh, sorry. To move, to discuss that?
No, just to actually make the motion
Oh,
on
to
that.
approve
Yeah.
it? Yeah. Motion to approve ordinance number 2021-16, adopting a final budget, making appropriations for the support of Herrmann City for the period beginning July 1st, 2021, and ending July 30th, 2022, and determining the tax rate at .001997 for levying taxes upon all real property within Herrmann City.
Still second.
Okay, a motion and a second. Steve? Jared?
Yes.
Clint?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. That motion passes. I will accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, sorry, I didn't have a second on that one. I didn't do that correctly. Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you.
Don't we have on the agenda to approve the budget? It needs to be approved tonight.
That was it.
That was
Okay.
that was what we just did.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
for being here.
everybody.